Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome back to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I am your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are excited to have our guest back on again, Mr. Josh Mullins. Josh is the managing director and founder of Automized, who helps automate and optimize business processes using intelligent automation technologies. In our last episode, we talked about how Josh helps companies to optimize their business processes using free tools, and also what things that companies can implement quickly as far as low-hanging fruit to do business better. So Josh, excited to have you back on and talk more about automation. Thank you, and welcome back.
Thanks, Mike. Looking forward to talking about business process automation today, and excited to jump in.
Awesome. So let's just start right off the top. What do you feel like is the main benefit that companies get by injecting automation into processes that are more manual?
Yeah, I'll kind of tie it back to like our mission at Automized. Really, it goes to creating like better cultures around like work. A lot of tasks that people do within a company today possibly have the opportunity to be automated, depending on the tools being used. But because of that, if a business gets really busy or end of month becomes really stressful, things like that, really our goal is to go into a company and give them the tools and kind of process efficiencies that allow the people within their companies to take vacations, spend more time with their families and not have like work in the back of their mind that's kind of distracting them, or even just be more involved in their communities. And that's really the goal with what we're doing. Yes, because you're doing this work, you're going to see an increase most likely in revenue or cost reductions and things like that. But ultimately, our focus is on people and making sure that kind of that work-life balance and quality of life is improved throughout.
Love that. Very important stuff, very important topics. And I think, it's one thing to automate an individual's role or the tasks that they need to complete in a day and make those more efficient. But what are some technology tools or processes that you help companies implement that bridge that gap between one department and another so that you're not just helping that individual, but also really the team as a whole?
Yeah, I would say from like a technology standpoint, we're doing a lot from like a digital workflow automation standpoint. That's a really broad and vague area, but we're looking at, okay, what processes are really repetitive, have defined rules, and kind of have a consistent volume. And then from there, we'll look at what technology supports automation the best within that. That's dependent on the systems and kind of what's being done today. And then the second area is going within a business and looking what's on paper. There are tons of businesses today that have paper forms for various things, whether that be out in the warehouse and tracking inventory coming in and out, or time cards, or just like a vacation leave form, things like that. We try to get those off of paper, whether that be in an existing tool they're using like WorkMax, or using a different tool that's a low-code app builder that allows us to quickly build something and maintain it in a way that supports the business long term. And really the concept there is, especially with paper forms, is on that piece of paper, the only person that can see that data is the person who has the paper in front of them. So when we have tools like workflow automation or low-code apps, we now can make that data more visible. The most common thing where we see opportunities for this is increasing like throughput or kind of your production like side of things, versus before it was all kind of siloed and you couldn't really have visibility unless you did a lot of digging. Now we're able to see almost in real time what's occurring and make decisions cross-functionally versus kind of in like that departmental view.
That's awesome. So when we hear words like optimization and automation, how important is it that things are optimized before you automate?
Yeah, it's so important. I would almost like consider us a process optimization firm that does work with technology solely because you can automate any process, but it doesn't mean it's the right solution or the best process to automate. The like example similar to like you probably hear with like data all the time is like garbage in, garbage out. So if you're spending a lot of time automating a bad process, you're still going to have issues when it comes to scale. It's going to technically be less expensive because you're not having someone do it. You're having a piece of software do it, but you're still going to increase costs every time your process goes up. And there's ways to build your processes and make them more efficient prior to implementing technology. And that's always our recommendation.
Okay, so then so let's say we've optimized, we've automated. What do you say to employees or management, people that you're working with that are afraid that if you do all this stuff, I'm not going to have my job anymore?
Yeah, I would say probably 98% of the time, people remain in their roles or even doing better work post us doing the work that we do, whether that be our company doing it or a project that you're kicking off internally and kind of leading yourself. The best way to kind of address that is talk about like, here's what this is going to allow you to do. So if you're sitting with somebody who's doing paper time card entry every week, talk about how, you know what, now they can really go out and be more proactive in supporting employees if they're within HR. Or if they're within accounting, they can be a little bit more strategic from a like job budgeting standpoint. Okay, really keeping tabs on what is about to happen versus what has already happened and kind of that retroactive correction approach. That 2% of that 98%, most of the times, those people were already kind of not going to stick around with the company much longer, whether that be from their own decision or somebody else's. So because they were performing toward the company standard or the business was already kind of looking for ways to optimize costs. So technology and this kind of automation work is sometimes a tool that is used, but really the focus is never that. It's getting people into better positions and higher value work that can drive a lot more value.
Yeah, I love that. So the focus on higher value work, which again is actually the opposite of becoming irrelevant to the business. You become actually more valuable.
Right, exactly.
So when you decide, hey, here's the thing that we need to focus on with this company or that company, how do you pick which area to focus on first? What's the lowest hanging fruit that you normally see, and what drives your decision in going there first?
Yeah, so last podcast I talked about like kind of two buckets when it comes to picking. So you're going to have the process of we're looking for time savings or like the manual effort that somebody's spending today and freeing up that time, whether that be on a different project or whatever that may look like. That's up to you. And then the second bucket is going to be around kind of that increasing your throughput or revenue, however you want to view that. So from a core kind of here are your top opportunities, finance and accounting related tasks, those really rules-based and repetitive on a certain cycle, those are great candidates for automation. And then you can kind of expand outside of there and kind of look within inventory and supply chain. And then project management. A great example is like job setup and job closing. Most likely within your company, if you're in like a trade, you have a checklist somewhere that says, okay, when we're done with a project, these 5 actions need to occur. A lot of times those 5 actions are very great candidates for some kind of automation work within your company.
Yeah, very, very insightful. So when obviously productivity is the first area that how can we be more productive, waste less time? What are some other less tangible or maybe often overlooked areas that automation actually still can increase profits overall that maybe aren't as obvious?
Yeah, I think if you kind of dig a layer deeper of like that manual effort and time, and kind of going back to like why we do what we do. If you're like focused on turnover and like hiring is a challenge for everybody right now, if you can keep an A player on your team, most likely if you were to go review the numbers, there's a pretty significant cost with somebody leaving your company and then having to onboard a new employee. So if you can invest in like tools and technology that keeps that star player around, who knows all your processes, is great culture fit, by implementing some tools and technologies that give them a little bit better of a job, because now they can focus on higher value projects, gets them out of the robotic nature of business. I would say that's going to be a really great lever for you, especially in an environment where it's challenging to hire and keep employees around.
Yeah, so you're talking, they're more content, they're more happy, they actually have more fulfillment. Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. And a lot of times, like the thought is, okay, we have to pay them more, but we can't because of like limited resources, things like that. But if you create a better rule for somebody by implementing these tools and like technologies that I've talked about, that's going to drive significant value for your organization long term and in the short term.
Yeah, and then you talk about manual processes. Well, manual means physically having to do something. And so when there's automation, it feels like there could be more flexibility as well. If the payroll can still run if you've got these tools in place, even if you got to, take Timmy to the soccer game, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't have to stay around and wait for something to process anymore. Once it's done, then it's kind of seamless for the most part. So.
Love that. So then tell us this. When should a company say, okay, it's time to bring a professional in here and really help coach us and guide us in some of these areas? Are there some things that you feel like are very common triggers for companies that spur them to call you?
Yeah, I like to say our unique kind of value prop is that we do the advisory and kind of help you understand what tools and like where your opportunities are. And then we do the implementation. And tying back to your question, why you would bring in like an expert like Automized or another company is when you necessarily don't have the time or resources to really drive a project from beginning to end, or you feel like you don't know like what's the best path to start. Like there's so many tools out there. We kind of selected the ones that we think are best. We have our own internal set that we use as well. But if you don't have the time to really see a project from here's why we're selecting this, here's where our opportunities are, and then selecting your tools and then actually executing that, I would recommend bringing in an expert, because really the biggest failure of this kind of work is when there's change management's not there, or you don't have everybody on board that you need to because people are busy and things like that. By having an expert come in, they can help you understand where your opportunities are and then also help coach you without much time needed on how you can drive that actual adoption within your business, because you can implement a tool, but if it's not used, you're actually not seeing that value that everybody estimated in the beginning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you have the ability to scale because you have the need and the opportunity to scale because you have work that's backlogged and you can't get to it all. Maybe you have enough staff that you could get to more work if you had more automation, if you had some of these efficiencies in place. What are some common things that you see companies able to enjoy that's a direct benefit because they put some of these tools in place?
Yeah, I would say it like boils down, I would say, to like a process. So when we come in or like you complete this kind of work, you've created a better process. And then hopefully at that point, you've also implemented technology to make that easier. So the common scenario I like to say is like before you start this kind of work, whether it be with a company like ours or internally, is there might be this kind of state of chaos of like, oh man, we just signed a customer on, there's another one coming, our backlog's so large. Like it's always kind of this constant fire drill. And the ideal state of when we leave or kind of are done with an implementation is that there's clarity and like, okay, here's what needs to get done. It's clear on here's the work that's incoming and what that means. But that work that's incoming and as we grow or scale down or whatever that looks like doesn't necessarily affect my day-to-day. I'm focused on more of those higher value projects and all these customer demands and things that are coming in at once. We have processes and systems to support that in a way that's manageable.
Yeah, that's great. So when you've put these processes in place for a company, what are some of the areas where you feel like they were super surprised at what they were missing out on? And maybe they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we didn't do this sooner. Is there anything you can think of specific you could share?
Yeah, I would say like inventory management is a huge one. Inventory in general is kind of gnarly, depending on your company and the size. As you get bigger, it gets harder. And because of that, a lot of people just use paper because it feels safe. You manage it, like kind of feel it tactily and like see what's occurring. But a company we worked with, they had everything on paper, and the balance that was shown in their accounting software and what was actually on their warehouse, like the difference kept growing and growing and growing. And by using like a low-code app that got the data off of paper and using some of the digital workflow automation tools, they were able to, one, see in real time, okay, what's actually occurring on the warehouse, and make some updates to their crews and things so more things were stocked on their trucks. But also that discrepancy like shrunk, I think around like 90%, which was significant. And it was really just purely improving a process and using a little bit of technology to help support that process in an automated fashion.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's awesome. Well, we all love it when we have those success stories and where you get to look at that customer across the table and say, see, I told you this is what it was going to be. There, oh, you were right. I wasn't sure, but you definitely, you were spot on that value that we were missing out on. And man, we're sure glad we did that, right?
Right. Yeah, it's the best feeling, especially because it's so tangible of like you were in a kind of state of chaos before or like didn't have great control. And then after the implementation, it's very clear and defined and like you have great data that's flowing from that.
Well, this has been fun. Another great conversation. I've loved having you back on. And we did a little word game in the first podcast we recorded, and you and I picked a special word that we were assigned each other to use. I gave you the word ubiquitous, and you did a fantastic job using it. So bravo to that. What was the word you gave to me, and how'd I do?
Yeah, I gave Mike the word jelly. I would say he did a pretty good job incorporating jelly into some kind of analogy with peanut butter and jelly processes. So really surprising with that one.
Yeah. And I love those sandwiches too, besides. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Josh. I hope that the listeners are able to walk away with a few takeaways. Is there anything you would like to impart as we wrap up today that they can take away from our conversations?
Yeah, I would just say, kind of recap, this is really impactful work for your organization, not only from a like cost savings or revenue growth, but also for your people. It creates better cultures and builds really strong teams that are resilient. And it's at the same time really hard work. So encourage you to like start carving out time now and thinking through how you can adopt like business process automation or some of these tools within your business. And if that is a kind of challenging or scary topic for you, happy to like feel free to shoot me a LinkedIn message or an email. Would love to talk to you through it because it's an area I love and I think it drives so much value for companies.
Yeah, these are great areas of working on the business things that all of us need to probably do a better job of within the industry. Wouldn't you agree? Exactly. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Josh. Looking forward to staying connected and getting these episodes out to the listeners. And thanks again for joining us today. Yeah, of course. It was great talking with you, Mike.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.